The last of the Christmas china was dried and put away, and a deep, quiet satisfaction settled over me. The house still smelled of pine and cinnamon, a sweet echo of the laughter and warmth that had filled it just hours before. I stood in the doorway of the living room, taking it all in. The tree, a majestic fir we had chosen together as a family, twinkled peacefully in the corner, its lights reflecting softly on the polished wood floor. Beneath it, a sea of torn wrapping paper and empty boxes remained, a joyful testament to the morning's chaos. Robert had already taken the children sledding, leaving me with the gift of a silent house. This was my favorite part of the holiday, the calm after the storm, a chance to savor the memories we had made. I decided to start with Robert's office. It was the one room that had been neglected in the pre-holiday rush, and I knew he would appreciate having a clear space to return to before the new year. His desk was a landscape of organized chaos, a trait I had always found endearing. Stacks of architectural drawings were weighted down by a vintage magnifying glass, and his favorite pen sat next to a framed photograph of us from our anniversary trip to Maine. I smiled, running a finger over the glass. He was a good man, a solid man. We had built this life, this beautiful, comfortable life, brick by brick over 20 years. I began gathering stray coffee mugs and stray papers, humming a Christmas carol. It was when I was tidying the shelf behind his desk that my fingers brushed against something unexpected. Tucked between a heavy book on urban design and a binder labeled tax documents was a small, crumpled paper bag from a local department store. It was odd. Robert was fastidious, almost obsessive, about his filing. A crumpled bag was out of character. My initial thought was that it must contain receipts from his own Christmas shopping, receipts he had forgotten to shred. I pulled the bag out and smoothed it on the desk. The crinkle of the paper sounded unnaturally loud in the quiet room. I reached inside and pulled out a small sheaf of receipts, their edges soft from being handled. The first one was from a gas station, dated early December. Nothing unusual. The second was from a hardware store. I was about to set them aside for his shredding pile when my eyes caught the logo at the top of the third slip of paper. It was from Hamilton & Sons, the most exclusive jeweler in the city. My heart did not yet sink. Instead, a flicker of warm anticipation sparked. Perhaps this was a receipt for my pearl earrings, the ones he had given me with such sweet ceremony on Christmas morning. He had told me he had searched for weeks to find the perfect pair. I remembered the weight of his hand on my shoulder as I had opened the velvet box, the genuine pleasure in his eyes when I had gasped with delight. The memory made me smile. I unfolded the receipt. The paper was crisp. The numbers were stark black ink. The date was November 15th. The item description was not for pearls. It was for a 1.5-carat diamond solitaire necklace, 18-inch white gold chain. The total, a number that made my breath catch, was $4,800. And in the field marked customer, the name was not Sharon. It was Keisha. Keisha, Marcus's wife, my friend, or I had thought she was my friend. A coldness began to spread through my chest, a numbness that started deep inside and radiated outward. My fingers felt clumsy as I fumbled for the next receipt. This one was from a more common department store, dated December 20th. This was for my pearls. Cultured pearl earrings, sterling silver settings. The total was $49.99. The disparity was a physical blow. $49 next to $4,800. My pearls, which I had worn with such pride, felt cheap and insignificant. The diamond necklace for Keisha felt like a blazing, expensive secret. I sat down heavily in Robert's leather chair, the scent of him, his cologne and his pipe tobacco, suddenly suffocating. My mind was a frantic, scrambling thing. There must be an explanation, a mistake, a business gift. Marcus and Robert were partners, after all. Perhaps it was a corporate present for a big client, and they had used Keisha's name for some logistical reason. But the cold disbelief was hardening into a sickening certainty. My hands were trembling now as I sifted through the remaining slips of paper. There was a receipt from a luxury boutique for a handbag, a designer name I recognized from magazines. $800, ordered for Keisha. Then another, from a resort spa 2 hours away, for a weekend package. The date was for late October, a weekend Robert had told me he was at a construction site review in another state. The reservation was for two. The name on the reservation was Keisha Anderson. The pattern was undeniable. This was not a single anomaly. This was a trail, a deliberate and ongoing series of transactions spanning the last 6 months. Each receipt was another crack in the foundation of my life. The beautiful Christmas tree, the happy memories, the entire fabric of the last 20 years began to feel like a stage set, a flimsy illusion I had constructed for myself. The generosity was not for a client. It was for her. The spa weekend, the handbag, the diamond necklace. It was a courtship, a secret life funded by my husband, conducted in the shadows of our own. I do not know how long I sat there, the crumpled bag and its damning contents laid out before me like evidence at a trial. The afternoon light faded, casting long shadows across the desk. The happy Christmas sounds from outside were a distant, mocking melody. I could not move. I could only feel the cold, sickening feeling growing in my stomach, a churning mix of betrayal and utter foolishness. The sound of the front door opening, of children's laughter and the stomping of snow boots jolted me back to the present. Robert's voice called out, rich and familiar. "Honey, we are home. You should have seen Sarah on the big hill." I stood up on unsteady legs. I gathered the receipts, my hands shaking so badly I could barely fold them. I walked out of the office and into the hallway. Robert was there, his cheeks flushed from the cold, his smile wide and genuine. He looked so normal, so like the man I loved. He started to say something else, but the words died on his lips when he saw my face. "Sharon, what is wrong? You are white as a sheet." I did not speak. I simply held out the small stack of papers. My arm felt leaden. The happiness drained from his expression, replaced by a flicker of confusion that quickly morphed into something else. I saw the moment he recognized the bag, the receipts. I saw the blood drain from his face, leaving a pale, waxy mask. The color did not just fade, it vanished. Where did you find those?" he stammered, his voice tight and higher than usual. "In your office," I said, and my own voice sounded foreign to me, flat and dead. "Behind your tax binder. I was cleaning." He reached for them, but I pulled my hand back. "Robert," I said, and the name felt strange on my tongue. "What is this? Who is this diamond necklace for? Who is the spa weekend for?" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I had seen 1,000 times, but now it seemed theatrical, desperate. "Sharon, it is not what you think. It is not what it looks like." "It looks like you bought another woman a diamond necklace," I said, each word a shard of glass in my throat. "It looks like you went away with her. It looks like you have been lying to me for months." No, listen to me," he said, his words coming in a frantic rush. He glanced toward the kitchen where the children were, lowering his voice to an urgent whisper. "It is for Marcus. It is a business thing. A client, a very important investor. He requires discretion. We had to make it look like the generosity was coming from us personally, for our wives. It is a front, a necessary front. Keisha is in on it. It is just for show." The lie was so weak, so transparently thin, that it took my breath away more than the receipts had. He was looking at me, his eyes wide with a desperate hope that I would believe this absurd story. He was asking me to accept that he would spend thousands of dollars on another woman as part of a business investment, while buying me a $50 pair of pearls, and that it was all perfectly normal. The man I had built a life with, the man I trusted completely, was standing before me, unraveling. I just stared at him, the papers clutched in my hand. I did not say a word. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy with everything that was broken. And in that silence, I saw the truth he would not speak. It was right there, in the panic in his eyes, in the pathetic tremor of his excuse. The Christmas lights twinkled on, a cruel reminder of the happiness that was, just an hour ago, the most real thing in my world. Now it was all ashes. And as I looked at my husband, I knew the life we had was over. The poison had taken root. It was not a sudden sickness, but a slow, creeping vine that twisted around my thoughts, choking out the light. The image of them, Robert and Keisha, standing so close in the kitchen, was burned onto the back of my eyelids. Every time I blinked, I saw it again, his hand on her arm, her head thrown back in a laugh that was a little too free, a little too intimate. I tried to push it away, to rationalize. Keisha was Marcus's fiancée. She was practically family. Of course Robert would be warm with her. He had known her since she was a gangly teenager trailing after our son. But the seed of suspicion, planted by that single, stray text message, had sprouted thorns. I began to sift through my memories like a detective reviewing evidence, and every scene I recalled was now tainted, every interaction viewed through this new, terrifying lens. There was the barbecue 2 weeks ago, Robert manning the grill, telling some story about his college days. Keisha had been hanging on his every word, her laughter ringing out above the chatter of our other guests. I had thought it was sweet then. Now I saw the way her eyes had stayed on him, full of a sparkling admiration that felt excessive. Then, the time she had hugged him goodbye after Sunday dinner. It had been a long hug, had it not? Her arms around his neck, his hands on her back. A perfectly normal father-in-law, soon-to-be hug, or was it something else? Something that lingered a heartbeat too long, that held a secret familiarity. The questions became a constant, swirling cacophony in my head. I would be folding laundry, smoothing out one of Robert's crisp dress shirts, and my hands would still. I would breathe in the scent of his fabric softener, a scent I had associated with home and safety for 30 years, and now it smelled like a lie. I looked at our bed, the king-sized sanctuary we had shared for decades, and it felt like a stage. Had he been acting all this time? Were all those quiet evenings watching television, his feet propped up next to mine, just a performance? I knew I was becoming a stranger to myself. The Sharon I knew did not rifle through her husband's pockets or check his phone when he was in the shower. But that is exactly what I did. I found nothing. His phone was locked, as always. His wallet contained only the usual credit cards, a few receipts for gas and hardware stores. He was careful. The thought made me nauseous. A careful man leaves no accidental traces. I needed an ally, a sounding board, someone who could look at this with me and tell me I was insane, that I was seeing ghosts. My only option was Marcus. My sweet, oblivious Marcus, who saw the world in primary colors of right and wrong, of love and loyalty. I could not tell him my darkest fear. I could not utter the words, "I think your father is having an affair with your future wife." To speak it would make it real, and it would shatter him. But I had to ask something. I had to poke at the edges. I invited him over for coffee on a Tuesday afternoon, when Robert was at a long meeting across town. I made his favorite, a complicated latte with extra foam, just the way he liked it. He sat at our kitchen island, so tall and handsome, his father's jawline but my eyes. He was talking excitedly about the wedding plans, about the venue Keisha had found. "It is perfect, Mom," he said, his smile so wide and genuine it broke my heart. "It has this garden, and Keisha, she has her heart set on it. Dad said not to worry about the cost, that he would handle the deposit. He has been incredible." There it was, my opening. I leaned against the counter, clutching my own mug for warmth. "He has," I said, my voice a little too bright. "Your father, he is very generous. Has he been helping out a lot, with unexpected things?" Marcus took a sip of his latte, oblivious. "Are you kidding? He is the best. He helped us with the down payment on the apartment, remember? And last month, when Keisha's car needed that major repair, he just wrote a check. Did not even blink. He told me a man takes care of his family." He beamed with pride, with love for his father. "Keisha adores him. She says she hit the jackpot with in-laws." Each word was a small, sharp needle piercing my skin. He just wrote a check, did not even blink. The generosity I had always loved about Robert now felt sinister. Was this how he paid for his secrets? With our money? With the security we had built together? "That is wonderful, honey," I managed to say, turning away to fiddle with the coffee machine so he would not see the strain on my face. "I am so glad that you both have that support." "We do," Marcus said, his tone softening. "And you, Mom, are you okay? You seem a little tired." The concern in his voice was my undoing. He saw a tired woman. He did not see a woman who was being hollowed out from the inside by betrayal. He was standing in the epicenter of an earthquake and felt only a slight breeze. "I am fine, sweetheart," I lied, turning back with a practiced smile. "Just not sleeping well, you know how it is." He accepted this easily because why would he not? His world was intact. Mine was fracturing into a million pieces. After he left, the house was silent, but my head was louder than ever. Marcus's happy chatter had not reassured me. It had deepened my isolation. I was alone with this terrible knowledge, and I knew with a cold, certain dread that if I was going to survive this, I needed proof. I needed to move from haunted suspicion to cold, hard fact. The following days were a blur of purposeful activity cloaked in normalcy. I made Robert his breakfast. I asked him about his day. I smiled and nodded while inside, a different woman was putting on a different kind of uniform. The uniform of a forensic accountant, a spy in her own home. I started with the obvious, our joint checking and savings accounts. The online passwords were saved on our shared computer. My hands trembled as I clicked through the statements. At first glance, everything appeared normal. The mortgage payment, the utilities, the grocery bills, but then I looked closer. I started comparing statements from 6 months ago to the present, and I saw it. A pattern. Every few weeks, a large withdrawal. $5,000. $10,000. Never the same amount twice, but always a round, significant number. They were labeled vaguely. Account transfer or funds allocation. My mouth went dry. I navigated to our savings account, the one we had nurtured for 30 years, the nest egg for our retirement, for emergencies. The balance should have been healthy, robust. It was anemic. It was a shadow of what it should have been. A substantial portion of our life savings was just gone. A cold fury began to burn in my chest, a cleaner, sharper emotion than the messy heartbreak. This was no longer about a possible emotional affair. This was about the deliberate, secret dismantling of our financial security. I stood up, pacing the room, my heart hammering against my ribs. Where was the money going? What funds was he allocating? I needed more. I went to the filing cabinet in Robert's home office, a place I rarely ventured. It was his domain, tidy and organized. I found the file labeled Home Equity. My breath caught in my throat. I pulled out the documents. There, nestled among the familiar paperwork for our original mortgage, was a new stack of papers. A second mortgage, taken out 6 months ago. The exact time the large withdrawals had begun. The numbers swam before my eyes. He had leveraged our home, the house we had raised Marcus in, the only true constant in our lives, without saying a single word to me. He had signed my name. A forgery, or had he found a way to do it without me? It did not matter. The result was the same. He had risked our home to fund what? A double life, an apartment for her? Gifts. The thought of him buying Keisha jewelry, clothes, with money stolen from our future, with the very roof over my head, made me physically ill. I slumped into his leather chair, the papers scattering on the desk. The room spun. The kind, supportive father Marcus praised was a phantom. The loving husband I had shared a bed with was a skilled and calculating stranger. The heartbreak was still there, a deep, dull ache, but it was now eclipsed by a raging, white-hot fury. This was not just a betrayal of vows, it was a betrayal of everything we had built, a theft of our past and our future. I heard the garage door rumble open. Robert was home. I quickly gathered the papers, my hands shaking so violently I could barely stuff them back into the file. I shut the drawer and slipped out of the office, returning to the kitchen just as the door from the garage swung open. He walked in, smiling, holding a small bouquet of flowers. "Lilies, my favorite. For you, my love," he said, his voice warm and familiar. For no reason at all. I looked at the flowers, then at his face, at the easy smile that had once filled me with warmth. Now, all I could see was the face of a man who could drain our savings, mortgage our home, and then bring me flowers with the same hands. I took them, my fingers brushing against his, and the simple touch felt like a violation. "They are beautiful," I said, and my voice sounded miles away. "Thank you." I turned to find a vase, my back to him, and as I filled it with water, I made a silent vow. The time for suspicion was over. The time for grieving would come later. Right now, I would hunt. I would find out exactly where our money had gone. And when I had the whole, ugly truth, I would make him pay for every single penny. The silence in the house was a physical presence, a third occupant that had moved in over the past week. It was not a peaceful quiet, but a thick, heavy pall that absorbed the sound of my footsteps on the hardwood, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant rush of evening traffic. I sat at the kitchen table, the polished oak surface cool beneath my palms. Before me, arranged with a precision that felt both surgical and sacrilegious, was the evidence. It was not a large pile, but its weight threatened to crush the very foundation of our home. There were the bank statements, their columns of numbers telling a story of quiet hemorrhage. Thousands of dollars, siphoned not to some romantic getaway, but to a string of online betting sites with names that sounded like distant, seedy planets. Then, the credit card bills, pushed to their absolute limits with cash advances. The final piece, the one that had unlocked the entire, horrifying puzzle, was the loan application document from Keisha's credit union. Robert had forged my signature. It was a shaky, clumsy imitation, but it was there, a desperate scrawl that made my stomach lurch. I had not cried when I found it. The tears had been burned away by a cold, clean fury that settled in my bones. This was not the hot, messy anger of a betrayed wife. This was the glacial rage of a person who had built a life, brick by careful brick, only to discover the architect had been sabotaging the structure from within. I heard the key in the front door, the familiar scuff of his shoes on the welcome mat. My heart did not flutter, it was a block of ice in my chest. I straightened my back, my hands resting flat on the table on either side of the documents. I would not greet him, I would not ask him about his day. I would simply wait. Robert walked into the kitchen, his tie loosened, a weary smile already forming on his lips. "Sharon, sorry I am late, traffic was a nightmare on the..." His voice trailed off as his eyes adjusted from the dim hallway to the bright kitchen light and fell upon the table upon me. The smile melted away, replaced by a flicker of confusion that quickly morphed into a dawning, gut-wrenching terror. He knew that I knew. "Sit down, Robert," I said. My voice was unnaturally even, a calm surface over a bottomless depth. He did not move. His eyes were darting from the papers to my face and back again, like a trapped animal searching for an escape route that did not exist. "What is all this? What are you doing?" I said, "Sit down." The edge in my tone was sharp enough to cut through his denial. He pulled out the chair opposite me and sank into it, his shoulders slumping. The weary executive was gone, replaced by a frightened boy caught in a terrible mistake. I began slowly, methodically. I pushed the first bank statement toward him. 3 months ago, $12,000, transferred to Winner's Edge Holdings. I placed the credit card bill next to it. $5,000 cash advance, paid to an account listed under Ace High Poker. I laid out each piece, one after another, a timeline of financial ruin. With every document, his face grew paler, a fine sheen of sweat appearing on his forehead. "Sharon, I can explain," he stammered, his voice thin and reedy. "I am not interested in your explanations," I interrupted, my voice still lethally calm. "I am interested in the truth, the full truth, not the lies you have been feeding me about investment opportunities and business expenses. I want to know where our savings have gone. I want to know why you felt the need to forge my name on a loan application with Keisha." I tapped the final document with my index finger. "And I want to know, right now, what the hell is really going on." He opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at the forged signature and something in him broke. The last vestige of his defenses crumbled. His shoulders heaved with a sob that was devoid of tears, a dry, wrenching sound. He collapsed forward, his head in his hands. "It was not an affair," he whispered, the words muffled by his fingers. "I have gathered that much," I said, the coldness in my voice unwavering. "The money did not go to a woman, it went to this." I gestured to the papers. "So tell me, what is more important than your family? What is worth this?" He lifted his head, and the look in his eyes was one of such profound shame and despair that for a fleeting second the ice in my chest cracked. "It is a sickness, Sharon," he choked out. "A sickness in my head. It is gambling. I have had a problem for years. It started small, just some sports bets with friends. But then it was online, and the amounts I could not stop. I lost control." The confession hung in the air, stark and ugly. A gambling addiction. It was so mundane, so cliché, and yet so much more devastating than an affair. An affair would have been a betrayal of our vows. This was a betrayal of our entire shared reality. He had not just been unfaithful to me, he had been unfaithful to our security, our future, our son's future. "The savings?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper now. "Gone," he said, the word a death knell. "All of it. I emptied the college fund 6 months ago. I thought I could win it back. I was so sure. I just needed one big win to make everything right, to replace it before you noticed." The room tilted. Marcus's college fund, the money we had scraped and saved for since he was born. Gone. Bet on a horse, a card hand, a stupid game. And Keisha, the gifts, the dinners. I could barely form the questions. "I needed cash," he explained, his words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "I had creditors, not the bank kind. Dangerous men. They were threatening me. I needed to borrow money from her, a large amount. I could not just ask. I had to butter her up. Make it seem like I was just a generous brother-in-law, that I would pay her back with interest from a sure-thing deal. The necklace, the trips, they were just to get her to trust me, to make the loan seem legitimate. I used her, Sharon. I used my own sister-in-law." At that moment, the kitchen door swung open. Marcus stood there, his face ashen. He had heard everything. The betrayal in his eyes was a fresh wound aimed directly at his father. "You lost my college money?" he breathed, the hurt in his voice sharper than any anger. You lied to Aunt Keisha, to us, about everything? He did not wait for an answer. He just shook his head, a look of utter disgust on his face, and turned, disappearing back into the hallway. The sound of his bedroom door slamming shut echoed through the house like a gunshot. The fallout was swift and brutal. Keisha arrived the next day, her face a mask of hurt and confusion. When Robert confessed his manipulation to her, the color drained from her face. "I thought you were being kind," she whispered, horrified. "I thought you were finally appreciating family. I was just a mark to you." She looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears, and left without another word, another relationship shattered by his deceit. In the days that followed, the house became a mausoleum of what we once were. Robert, hollowed out by his confession, agreed to enter a rehabilitation program for gambling addiction. It was a necessary step, but it felt like applying a bandage to a severed limb. The man I had built my life with, the man I had loved for 20 years, was a stranger. He was not the confident provider I thought I knew. He was a drowning man who had been pulling us all under with him, too terrified to cry for help. The night before he left for the facility, I stood in our bedroom, packing a suitcase for him. He watched me from the doorway, a ghost of his former self. "Sharon, I am so sorry," he said, his voice raw. "I will fix this. I will get better. I will earn your trust back." I did not look at him. I continued folding a shirt, my movements precise and detached. "The program is 30 days, I stated. "We will talk when you are finished." When the suitcase was packed, I did not leave it by the door. I carried it myself, not to our bedroom, but down the hall to the guest bedroom. I set it on the bare mattress. I turned to face him, standing in the hallway behind me, his hope crumbling as he understood. "This is where you will sleep when you return," I said. The words were not cruel, just final. They were the new boundary, the new reality. I walked past him, back toward the master bedroom, the room that had been ours. I did not look back. I closed the door behind me, the click of the latch sounding unnaturally loud in the silent house. I leaned against the cool wood, listening to the absolute stillness on the other side. He was still out there, the stranger I had married, and I was in here alone. The debt had been called in, but it was not a debt of money. It was a debt of lies, and the interest had already consumed everything we were. The future was a vast, empty space, and I had no map, no compass, and no idea how I would find my way through it alone.